We are going through a series of podcasts called Questions from Those Who Do Not Attend Church. It's gone by really quickly. We're going to do a total of 9. This is number 6. And so next week we'll release 3 more. And here's the background of it. We've been asking, or we have had those who don't attend church ask us questions, and pastors who are part of our tribe. Why does this happen in a church? Why does the church do this? And questions that most of you who are in church, or questions for you who are church leaders, will just think it's common sense because you know your church or you know what churches do. But quite frankly, as our culture becomes increasingly secular, this is a question these are the types of questions that you will have to answer more and more. Now, here's kind of a fun thing. I know that many of you, because you've told me, many of you who listen or watch this podcast don't attend church. Many of you are not Christians. You're here because of curiosity, because you want to learn something. I don't know, but I am glad you're here. And I hope that this series of questions from those who do not attend church helps you, because we who are Christians, we who are in churches, should not expect you to know all the inside stuff that we know. Okay? So I'm going to be sharing some of this. This is the Church Answers Podcast. My name is Thom. As you heard, our sponsor is Cheney and Associates, the accounting firm for the church. And they have been working for 21 years helping churches with their accounting, their bookkeeping, and they've worked with over 1,100 churches. It's a place you need to go if you need accounting work done. Of course you do. You need accounting work done. Okay, 6th episode, talking about questions from those who do not attend church. This question came up about a year ago, and I've heard it asked in different ways at different times, but it's very basic. How do churches fund their activities? Now, we could broaden that to their programs, their ministries. How do they pay their personnel? How do they keep their facilities going? All of those are key issues. But the question is, how do they fund them? Well, I'm going to give you a broad answer, and then I'm going to give you some sub-answers. The broad answer is most churches fund their ministries, their programs, pay their personnel, keep their buildings going from gifts from their members. Okay, it doesn't have to be all their members, just to be clear, but most churches get gifts from their members. Most churches, the large portion of the money that comes in comes from what you would normally call donations. They're supported by those who are willing to support the church. They depend upon those who are willing to support the church. So the vast large number, I don't have a percentage, but in many churches it's 90%, 95%. We know that most churches get their money from basically a weekly offering that comes in. Now, that offering used to come in through passing a plate or a bucket or something like that during the service. Many churches still do that, but many churches, of course, have online giving. It especially happened during the pandemic when people weren't attending churches that they started giving online. But regardless of the mechanism by which they get money, get funds, they are getting it mainly from the volunteer contributions of church members. Just a word on that. A church is not unlike another nonprofit in this sense. Most of their gifts come from just a few people relative to the total population. So the old 80-20 rule in many churches would be true. 20% give 80%. Sometimes it's 10%, give 90% or something of that nature. Usually it's tilted where it's not spread out evenly. And so there are few people who give a significant portion to a church. But okay, I'm getting off track. How do churches fund their activities? They fund their activities by volunteer giving of members. We call those tithes and offerings. Now, what's the difference between the two? Offering is the broad category of all gifts that are given by individuals. Tithe, in its biblical sense, represents the 10% of someone's income. And there are many churches and there are many Christians who believe strongly that they should give at least 10% of their income. They believe in the tithe. There's some who do not, just to be clear, but you often hear it referred to as tithes and offerings. Offerings, the big category. If I'm a tither in my church, which I am, I shouldn't boast about it, but I'm more than a tither. if I'm a tither in my church, that is also the offering in the church. The tithing represents my 10%. Some church leaders will say the offering is everything above the 10%, but offerings usually refer to anything that people give within the church. So how do churches fund their ministries, their activities? Gifts from members, often called tithes and offering. Now, kind of a subcategory to this, some churches get designated gifts or special gifts from members. It's kind of different. There's still members giving, but instead of just giving to the general fund for a church, they may give to a building fund to help the church build something or to repair something. Or they may give to a mission fund to fund missionaries that the church sends out or that they support. So there are general offerings that go to the general support of the church, but then sometimes church members will say, I want to give to, in the following, a designated type of giving. Many times the church has conduits for which they can do that. So how do they fund their activities? Beginning with general offerings or gifts from members, then sometimes special gifts from members for special purposes. Now, if I were to stop there, you would have really almost all that you would need to know about how a church funds its activities, its ministries, its programs, its personnel, its building. But I do want to mention a couple of others because this is true in some churches. Some churches have been given large gifts, sometimes even millions of dollars. Maybe they've received it in an inheritance or some other type of mechanism, and they have this large sum of money, and they choose to live off the interest of this gift that has been given, often called endowment earnings. So there are a few churches who have income coming in, which is basically the interest of their earnings off of a large gift that was given. Again, those churches are not large in number. As we're seeing the great transfer of wealth from my generation, the boomer generation, to others, we're going to potentially see more of this. And you know what my hope is? My hope is churches will say, remember us in your will. Remember us as a part of your gifts. Colleges will say it. Universities will say it. Other nonprofits will say it. Churches could do so as well. But just to let you, the non-attender, know, most churches don't get these large gifts, and so they don't have the interest or the endowment earnings off of that. Finally, final category, denominational support. It is true that a few churches are actually receiving money from their denomination, sometimes in their early stages of starting. It's called a church plant, and they will receive money from their denomination. Again, in the broader context of where churches get their money, this is a relatively small amount. To be candid, most churches give to the denomination instead of denomination give to the churches. But yet in some instances, the church denomination will actually give to the church. So in summary, how do churches fund their activities? Mainly from ongoing gifts from members. Sometimes those gifts are for a general fund. Sometimes they're special or designated. They're often called tithes, the 10% of what the church members earn. Not all church members give 10%. In fact, it's a minority, or just the offering, what people give. Sometimes there are endowment earnings off of big gifts, but that's rare for most churches. And sometimes a denomination is actually supporting a church, particularly in its early stages. But I guess if you were just to ask me, if you're a non-attender of a church, and you would come up to me and say, how does the church pay their bills? How does the church pay their personnel? How does the church fund their ministries and programs in the community? How do the churches support missionaries? My simple answer would be this: they do so by the generosity of church members. That's what they depend upon. And that to me is a very cool way that churches are doing what they do, because it's voluntary, it comes from the heart, it is a desire for people to support the ministry. We're going to continue answering these questions from those who do not attend church on the Church Answers podcast. Hey, will you come back next week? I got 3 more questions that we're going to attempt to answer. Trying to do this special series about questions from those who do not attend church. Hope you've enjoyed it. Again, give us a like, give us a rating, a review, or subscribe at YouTube on the YouTube channel at Church Answers. Let us know that you're a part of this so we can spread the word about this ministry and mission. Once again, to all of you, thank you for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. We appreciate you. We don't take you for granted, and we'll see you or hear from you in the next episode.